We move now to chapter 10. It's called Contracts. As I told you when we did the first video, that business law is basically about contracts. I told you that contracts play a part in our life from life to death. That when we're born as the result of a contract. Two people got together and decided to bring us in this world. When we go to work or school, it's the result of a contract. When we go to school in return for our studying and doing what's proper, we get a degree. When we go to work, it's a contract. In return for our labor, we expect to get paid. When we marry, it's a contract. When two people exchange vows to love, honor, and cherish, it's simply the terms of the contract. When we die, if we leave a will, as I told you earlier, will is simply a contract to be performed after death. Now, the law of contracts is important. Almost every agreement is based on a contract. The exchange, that's the key. Now, so that you'll know, if you ever read a legal document and you see the letter K, then that's the symbol for contract. Now, contracts can be found in different places. What we have now is, number one, where contracts can be found, is called the common law. Number two is called the restatement of contracts. Most of your textbooks are based on the restatement. Now, let me explain what the restatement is. After World War II, many states got together and decided to make the law the same in each state. As you know, each state has different laws, but in some areas of law, they wanted to make the laws the same in each of the states. What they did is they called it the restatement, restating the law. Almost all the states agreed to the restatement except Hawaii and New York. New York claimed that because of its special place as the economic center of the U.S., that contracts are different. Law in New York had to be a little different. Hawaii did not join because most people don't understand that Hawaii, before it became part of the United States as a territory, was an organized society. It had a king, queen, laws, traded with other countries, diplomats. It was an independent country, and therefore has a tradition of laws that go back for centuries and did not want to replace their laws. New York contract law, which New York follows, is called the New York General Obligations Law. And that's the law of contracts in New York. Now, what is a contract? Listen carefully. A contract is an agreement between two or more persons. Persons includes businesses and partnerships, consisting of, and the word is, mutual promises which the law will enforce. The bases, B-A-S-E-S, of contract law is agreement and obligation. In other words, you agree to be obligated. The basis of all contract law is trust. And it's important to understand that. Now, as I told you, we're studying substantive law, and I told you when something is substantive, that it's made up of something. So we must know the elements of a contract. The first element is called mutual assent. Mutual assent is the agreement. Chapter 10 in your book. Second is called consideration. What one gives or receives for the promise. The third element is capacity. And capacity speaks to who may enter a contract. And the fourth element is called legality. The object or purpose of the agreement must be lawful. As a contract is an agreement that will be enforced by law, the law will not enforce an illegal agreement. We study contracts by studying each element. For example, our third quiz will be on agreement and consideration. When we study each element, we study on how to reach mutual assent, meaning mutual agreement. We learn what we can use as consideration and what we cannot use as consideration. We learn who has the capacity to enter a contract and who does not. And we learn what is legal and illegal. Now, we find that most students have problems with the second element of contracts, consideration, meaning what one gives or receives for the promise. Now, why does people have problems with that? Because most people try to get something for nothing. Consideration says you can't get something for nothing, that everything you get, you must pay something for. In other words, there's nothing free in this world. A lot of people can't accept that. A lot of people will tell you that, oh, I know something that's free. It may seem free, but it's not. Now, all contracts fit into two types. The first type is called a bilateral contract. And a bilateral contract is a promise for a promise. I promise, you promise. Bilateral. The second contract type that contracts fit into is called a unilateral contract. And that is a promise for an act. So if I hire you to cut my grass, when you cut the grass, I pay you. We've had a unilateral contract. What was the act? The act was you cutting the grass. Now, all contracts are either bilateral or unilateral, but contracts take different forms. The first is called an express contract. It's also referred to, and you might put this down, as a formal contract. And an express contract is where the parties expressly state their intentions and obligations. The second form that a contract takes is called an implied contract. An implied contract is also called an informal contract. And this is a contract determined by the conduct of the parties. Not where they formally write down, but where their actions show that they have an agreement. And the third one is called a quasi-contract. A quasi-contract is based on the concept of equity. If you go back to our first three videos, you'll see that we gave you the definition of equity. Now, this is important. A quasi-contract is a contract created by operation of law. The law creates a contract where none exists, but fairness and justice require the parties to have an agreement to prevent unjust enrichment. In other words, to prevent someone from getting something for nothing. The bases, B-A-S-E-S, of quasi-contract is promissory estoppel, which literally means you can't deny your promise. Promissory estoppel provides that a contract is enforceable without, underline without, consideration, the second element of contracts, if a party believed or trusted in the promise of another to their harm or detriment. Quasi-contract exists so that someone doesn't get something for nothing. As I told you, we study contracts by studying each element. So let's take the first element. Promissory estoppel provides that a contract is enforceable without consideration if a party justifiably relied upon the promise of another to their harm or detriment. As we told you earlier, it's designed to prevent someone from getting something for nothing. As I told you, we study contracts by studying each element. The first element is called mutual assent, which simply means mutual agreement. That sounds simple, but reaching mutual agreement is a very difficult time. How many times have you told someone to do this and you ask them if they understand and they go out and do something different? So we say that the best way to achieve mutual assent, or what we call a meeting of the minds, is with an offer and acceptance. If I make an offer to sell you my house and you agree to buy it, you accept it, then we have a meeting of the minds. We both agree that you will buy my house. Now, it's hard, as I told you, to reach common agreement. So we say that the best way to reach it, as I said earlier, is with an offer and acceptance. Now, what is an offer? Let's take it down. An offer is a communication which gives the recipient or receiver of the communication the power to conclude a contract by acceptance. We know that an offer must be clear and concise so that they can be an acceptance. Now, what is an offer? Take this down, for a communication to be an offer, it must be certain and definite. Listen to the words, for certain and definite. When something is certain and definite, it means it's free of ambiguity or doubt. As you know, most people do not speak in certain and definite terms. Sometimes we won't say what we really mean because we're afraid we might offend somebody, or we're not clear about what we mean. But for communication to be an offer, it must be certain and definite. Now, put this down. Advertisements, some people pronounce it advertisements, in newspapers, on radio and television, or by direct mail, are not offers unless they limit quantity or state something like first come, first served. So if you pick up a newspaper and it says television's $100, and you go to the store and they don't have the television, you can't see because that's not an offer. But if the advertisement says television's $100 for the first 100 people, and you're number 25 and they have no television, you can sue because that was a communication that was certain and definite. Who was it certain to? The first 100 people. What was definite about it is that they could buy a TV for $100. Now, we know how to make an offer. We need to know how to terminate an offer. So please take this down. An offer may be terminated in any one of the following ways. Number one, passage, P-A-S-S-A-G-E, passage of a specified time stated in the offer. So if this offer says this offer will end at 3 p.m. on Friday, if you come at 3:01, the offer is terminated. Number two that will terminate an offer is passage, same word, of a reasonable time when no specified time is stated. So if the offer doesn't say when it will terminate, then it will terminate after a reasonable time. The word reasonable is one of those words in English that has no permanent meaning. What determines what is reasonable is the facts. So if I offer to sell you some food, a reasonable time will be short because food is perishable. If I offer to sell you my house, a reasonable time could be longer because the house is not perishable. Then number three, or next, that will terminate an offer is rejection. When a party rejects an offer, it is terminated. But this is important to remember. A rejection is not effective until received. Next will terminate an offer is revocation. To revoke. And put this down, an offer may be revoked at any time before acceptance. And like an rejection, a revocation is not effective until received. I call it the 3 R's: rejection, revocation, received. Next that will terminate an offer is called a counteroffer. Why? Because a counteroffer is in reality a rejection. If I offer to sell you my bicycle for $100 and you say that you will only pay $50, then what have you done to my $100 request? You've rejected it. And we've changed places. Now you're making the offer and I have the power of acceptance, whether or not to accept your $50. The next thing that will terminate an offer is called supervening illegality. In an earlier video, we talked about supervening. Supervening, again, let me repeat, means the superior intervention of the law. So, an offer will be terminated by supervening illegality is where the law intervenes to make that which was legal now illegal. In other words, I make an offer to you that's legal at the time I make it. Then they pass a law saying you can't make that offer. Then the law has intervened to make what was legal now illegal. Next, that will terminate an offer is death or insanity of either the person making the offer, who is called the offerer, or the person accepting the offer, who is called the offeree. Now, this is important to note. Death does not end contracts. Let me repeat that. Death does not end contracts. If death ended contracts, then we wouldn't have a thing called wills, because a will is a contract to be performed after death. But death does end offers. So, if a person makes an offer and dies, then the offer dies with him. If the person makes an offer and is accepted and it becomes a contract, the contract lives. Next, that will terminate an offer is failure to meet any condition of acceptance. There are two types of conditions. The first is called the condition preceding. And that's any condition that must be met, and underline this, before acceptance. So that's when someone says, in order to accept this offer, you must deposit $100. If you want to accept, the first thing you must do is deposit the $100, a condition preceding. The second condition is called the condition subsequent. And a condition subsequent is any condition that must be met at the time of acceptance or shortly thereafter. So we now know how to make an offer and how to terminate an offer. Let's move now to acceptance. Acceptance is the assent by the offeree to the proposal made by the offerer. What we must know is the elements of acceptance. Let's take it down. Number one, only the party to whom the offer is made may accept. So if I make an offer to John and he says no, but Mary hears the offer and says yes, can she accept? No. Because once John said no, the offer terminated. Rejection terminates an offer. See the logic of following it, the rules? Acceptance must be within, number two, acceptance must be within the terms of the offer. In other words, you can only accept what is offered. If you demand more than what is offered, it's called the counteroffer. And as you know, a counteroffer will terminate an offer. Next, a party must know of the offer at the time of the offer. There can be no blind acceptance. Communication, number four, communication of acceptance. A party must let the other party know they accept. Now, there is an exception, and we will talk about that exception in our next video.